Agents Podcast.
My favorite podcast episodes are probably the episodes where I get to talk to living, breathing real estate agents that are succeeding in years when many are fleeing the business. And today's guest came to me by way of honestly social media conversations because this gentleman is evolving. And when I say he's evolving, I mean he was a consistent, roughly $25 million producer. And we'll get into this story here up until 2023, where he jumped to 45 million in volume. And this year, 2024, is on pace for 60 plus million in volume. And so in years when many agents are scraping the bottom to just stay afloat, Chris Rigby is thriving, and he is going to share with us today his story, the things that he does to procure his business, why he is growing, and what he is doing that you can emulate in your business to have the same success. So without further ado, welcome to the show, Chris Rigby, who is from basically the Seattle area, very specifically a town called Mukilteo, Washington, about 30 minutes north of Seattle. He's with a real estate company called Windermere. Dude, welcome to the show, man. Glad to have you here.
All right. Thanks for having me, Jeff.
Absolutely. So, Chris, let's start here, man. I don't always interview real estate agents. And again, we've just come across each other through mutual friends. Now we're doing some stuff together. And your story is incredible because most of what I hear is just a bunch of sob stories. And you and I connected, and you're like, yeah, I can't keep up with the business. I'm so damn busy. Like, I need to figure out better systems. And it got me interested. And so let's start though. Let's rewind the clock. Let's stop that conversation because I want to know about you. And so, tell us about your career. Like where'd you start when you left school and what led you to where you are today?
So yeah, no, I started in retail. Most of my career was retail with Nordstrom. And I worked there on and off through college, stayed on with them, started opening stores with them. I lived in Boston for 4 years, opened stores out there with them, and then got back to Seattle. And then my brother-in-law so happened to be in real estate and got my license, started working with him, small boutique brokerage, was there 4 years into like out of my 13 years. And quickly realized that like that's not necessarily the way I wanted to do business. And so I interviewed with different brokerages, and Windermere fit that like customer service background. That's kind of what Windermere is all about, and that's what my business is about. It's most of it's referrals and past clients and things like that. And that's a large part of what the beginning of my career looked like. But I did start out when I was with my brother-in-law. I was like, we were doing Zillow leads. That was when that was pretty fresh and new. A lot of that like internet leads and stuff like that. And I quickly figured out like, you're a hired gun. You don't pick up the phone or you're not available. They're just going to click on it, click and go to another person down the line. So my business has changed now that I attract people. And people call me. Like I was driving into the office yesterday morning, and hey, you're the listing agent. We just bought this house from you last month. We want to have you sell our house. Million dollar sale, like crazy, like wild. Like I was like,
They just bought it.
They just bought a house that I had listed, but now they want me to sell their house that they moved from, not their agent that they used. Which is interesting, but but the way you carry yourself or the way you interact with people, part of my, things, I was at that 500,000 GCI for like 5 years, which is great. I mean, that's a lot of money. That's good by just about anybody's standards. And, I did appraisals as well. So I was doing both real estate and I was doing residential appraisals. And as the rates went up.
Was that from day one? Were you doing, so when you left retail, what
Mhm.
year was that when you left retail and to go into the real estate industry?
2012.
Okay. And then, so after the crash, and then what did you do immediately when you got in real estate? Did it immediately was get your license and join Windermere?
No, right when it came into real estate, it was like all pro real estate, small firm in Seattle. Started there. I did 20 transactions my first year.
Wow.
Uh, um, and I mean, I was in the office at 6 a.m. every morning, and like I didn't really know what I was doing. Like I was just looking on the MLS and going through it, and then just by being that person that was always there and in the office, like people that were busy or going on vacation would have me like kind of fill in for them, and I just assimilated into like taking on deals that maybe other people wouldn't have done. But I mean, I was driving all over God's creation. Like I was driving 2 hours each way for, REO properties for 150,000 at that time. They're probably like a million now. But that just, it was the dog shit. Like
Yeah.
they were not the fun things, but I managed to scrap that. I think I made like 100 my first year.
Go and coming
Which
from a retail business where I can't imagine you were anywhere near 100 grand.
Yeah, I was like 75. I was like in management. So it was like decent, but like you're working like weekends, holidays, setting up for sale. I mean, like you just no life, right? So I was like, I'll do this. This is great. Like I'll take $9,000 paycheck for, I think my first listing closed, and I was like, I'm out. Like goodbye. This is like 6 months of retail work here. I'm gone.
No
Um,
doubt.
and I mean, you obviously have a lot more costs that like you get that first paycheck, but you have a lot more costs that like, you have taxes, all that
Of
stuff that's
course.
not taken out. So it's really not that much money, but I was excited and I got doing that. And then, a second year, I think I did 32 transactions. So,
Wow. So,
um,
so I want to stay here for a second because there's probably some agents that listen to this or leaders that have young agents that are coming in the industry. And I think it's always fascinating to hear how people make it their first couple of years because it's tough, man. I mean, there's a lot of real estate agents that got into the industry and did one deal their first year. And it took 2 or 3 years until they really got going. And so I think it's interesting to hear what your philosophy or strategy was, which was simply almost like just, hey, I'm going to be a fly on the wall and I'm going to be a fly that's there as much as possible so I can leech off the people that have the experience and don't want to do the shitty deals. I mean, did I sum that up about right?
yeah, yeah, I'd say that's what it is. And take those floor calls or whatever, or be in the office. I mean, if you factor in like the amount of phone calls, like say you're cold calling and you're just going through and calling, like you're going to make 100 phone calls before someone even picks up the phone. And then you got to make then you got to have another 100 connections before you get someone that converts, right?
Yeah,
Maybe two. So if you sit in the office, it's like you're sitting there, it's essentially doing the same thing, but you're actually in the office and you may pick up someone who's not available or someone does a floor call into the office and but you're spending time, which is money, but you're at that time I was just like I was hungry to learn. So I was like listening to the phone conversations that people were having on the phone, how they were negotiating these deals, and just kind of being like, and then like, hey, do you need me to go take a lockbox off for you? Do you need me to go do that for you? And by just being present and being more willing to do anything, people just naturally were like, hey, can you help out with this? I'm going to be out of town. Can you help this buyer? I'm out of town. So I was just there. Like those first like 4 years, like I was just always in the office. I was up and I was at the office at like 6 a.m. every morning. And I was like usually there till about 2 or 3, and then I would go show houses. And that was it.
Hmm. That's awesome. And I mean, it really is that simplistic. So it wasn't, you weren't necessarily working sphere of influence. You weren't door
I didn't have a
knocking.
Yeah, I didn't have a sphere. Like, cause I was in Seattle and most of it, like I grew up 30, 40 minutes north of Seattle. And I think I was at that time, I was like 22, 25 or so anyways, but nobody I knew was buying houses. I mean, it was like right after the crash, like, nobody was buying houses that I had, or if they had bought in houses before that, they just had stated income and like, they lost their house or whatever. So there was nobody that in my bracket that was necessarily buying houses. That knew, like, and trusted me or anything along those lines. So I worked those internet leads hard for like those first 4 years. And as I transitioned through that, my goal was like, okay, look, all these buyers are eventually going to turn into sellers. And like, as long as I take like insanely good take care of each of these people and like bend over backwards and like do these things for them, like and I didn't know this at the time, but they were like, a lot of those were referrals too. So that like, maybe I only got like out of that five, I got like two or three referrals from that five. And so now, like, one of my goals is for every piece of business I have or every listing I get, my goal is to get three other pieces of business off of that. And that is what, once you start that momentum and you keep it going, and that's what it starts to snowball. And that's kind of what the last 2 years have been.
Got it. So let's stay in the past for a minute. And so you got through your first year, you did well. You got through your second year, you improved. Where was the next, that was, 12 and 13. Then you get into, basically 14 to roughly 22. So the next 8 years, like, what does that look like?
So the next 8 years, so we moved out of the city. And then that was kind of what sparked the change in like brokerages. It's because we were moving out of the city and we were moving further north. So I wanted to make sure that I had an office that I could like be in every single day. Like, and I'm not going to drive 45 minutes each way just to be at the office and then drive 4 or 5 hours showing houses and stuff like that. So I interviewed with like 7 or 8 different offices, found the one I wanted to work at, and then it's like 10 minutes from my door to that office door, and like I was same thing. I was in there at 6:30, out by like 2 every day.
That had to be a ghost town from like 6:30 to 9, maybe even 10.
Yeah, that office, even there, yeah, that office. I was gonna say, even pre-COVID, that was like they were ghost town. Most offices are ghost towns these days. So
Yeah, more so now, but even back then, still to a degree.
yeah, even so, but even back then, and I think the I mean, there's always people like, I'm dressed up today. I'm always dressed up, like
You are?
always dressed
Yep.
up,
I've
like
noticed
every
that.
single day,
Yep.
every day, I'm always dressed up. And so part of that is that I wanted to make sure that like, if, say you got called to a doctor's appointment or something like that, and it was someone you didn't, this guy over here, he's always like, he's always not professionally dressed, and you got $1 million buyer and you need someone to go show a house, you're like, I'm not going to send that. I'm not going to try to refer to that guy, even though he probably knows more than the guy that's dressed up. The guy that's dressed up at least going to like show up and be the part. So, like 80% is just showing up and being ready. And so I got a lot of business that way, just always being present, ready to go. And it's interesting to watch how like things change, because everybody's like, oh, it's because you're Nordstrom background, you're always dressed up. I'm like, yeah, maybe a little bit.
I was thinking
like,
that.
I was like, but if you go to Nordstrom now, you can't tell who works there and who's shopping, because they're all casual. I mean, they do have name tags now, but it's interesting to see how that dynamics change. But you can still see, like, you can tell who's like running the floor when you walk in there, and it's like the guy that's still dressed up, because everybody, I mean, like, he's the smart one because everybody goes to him because they can distinguish him between all the other salespeople. But yeah, and even in our industry, it's like you dress for what you want to attract. Like my goal, and I think we talked the other day, yesterday, is like I want to go into like more high-end luxury. And so like higher end luxury, they have a different expectation probably that, this guy is, well dressed. And that's, I think it's like what the first 8 seconds of interacting with someone, you can tell if you want to work with them.
Yeah.
I mean, you might not even have said something in those 8 seconds. So it's like, how does that work? So
Presentation. Yeah, presentation, body language, all those things. Yeah.
I might be an idiot. I might just be dressed nice. I may just be lucky. But I think a big part of it is just was being willing to do whatever it took to make sure clients were happy, being present at the office, and then the veterans that were around the office, like asking them questions and being willing to, that was before like open houses were popular. I would
Yeah.
I would do open houses for people that, and that was just getting and talking to people about real estate, because I didn't know anything about real estate. Like I'd never even bought a house.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Wow. That's crazy. So now fast forward to where we are, or, I would say, probably I feel like 2022 was the breakout, because what you did in 22 led to 23. And obviously what you did in 23 now has led to 24. And now this is going to continue to, as you mentioned, snowball. So was there ever like a breakthrough of what, because a lot of what you're talking about is just overarching. It's 30,000 foot view. It's just how I carry myself, how I dressed, how I showed up, when I showed up, which is fascinating because I could go interview 100 real estate agents, and I'm not sure that one of them would say they've ever showed up to the office at 6 or 6:30. So that's fascinating in and of itself. But I think some young real estate agent listening might gain something from that, because you get out of it what you put into it, right? And
Mhm.
that's what you're living proof of. But going back to the question of, okay, do you feel like there was like a breakthrough moment, and that's when things started to take off?
Yeah. So I have gone through multiple different coaching platforms, and that started in about like 2016. So like I started with Mike Ferry, and that's like a lot of cold calling, all that kind of stuff. I did that for about a year. Um, it wasn't like there's not my jam. Like, and I realized quickly, like those aren't necessarily the people I want to work with, like because they've already been burned or scorched earth with like another agent, and like it's an uphill battle. And then even after you close the transaction, there's no like happy, warm, fuzzy feeling. It's like get away from me. Like I'm done with real estate agents. Like you were a means to an end. Um, and then I started doing ninja coaching, which is Buffini and core coaching are off of like ninja too. They have similar paths, but I think that at one point in time they were all kind of intertwined together before they broke out. Buffini and core went their ways, and I may be wrong about that, but they all have similar things, and it's based off of your sphere. Because now I did have a sphere, because 4 years in I had a sphere. Um, so I started doing that, and then in 2022, and I started in 17. I really got interested in like pricing, and I had a buddy that was an appraiser. It's hard to get your appraisal license. It's hard to find someone to train you. Anyway, I trained this guy to be an agent, and he's like, my neighbor's he's looking for someone to train. So I was like, well, okay. And so I was like, I got another half of the day to work on appraisals. So I got into appraising. So I was doing both of those. So I was appraising like 8 or 9 properties a week, and I was still selling like 20 to 25 houses a year. Um, Fast forward to 2022, when the rates went up, all the appraisals went down. There was no appraisal business. So I was like, well, I had 4 or 5 pretty good years. I've got a pretty good nest egg. I was like, I'm just gonna like get into like marketing. Like I've never gotten into marketing before. And so I started doing postcards with USA Mortgage. And I targeted a geographic area that I live in. And I started with like 4,000 a month, which was like $1,000. It was like what the cost was. It was like $1,000 to hit 4,000 doors.
We'll get into that. 4,000, you started at 4,000 postcards a month.
Right.
Were you
So I
doing direct? You had a list, or was it EDDM?
EDDM.
So explain what that means for somebody who doesn't know what that means.
So yeah, so every door direct mail. So I picked like I there's multiple facets to it, and like I picked an area that's got like a certain amount of turnover. I just so happened to live in that area, so I knew how large I needed to go to get the amount of turnover I needed. And then but my budget, I was like, okay, well, how much is it going to cost to mail to this? And I was like, okay, I can chew that. I can do that for 12 months, and it's not going to be a big deal. And so I just, plan on doing that for 12 months. Um, Also in that area, I had been doing open houses consistently for like 3 years. So like every weekend, my name was up on the boulevard. And so people were like driving by and they're seeing my name. So when I started putting in the postcards into the equation, that's when like I hit off the second postcard.
Wow.
I hit off the second postcard, and I got that was a $1.2 million listing, sold in 2 days. The third postcard I hit a $1.6 million listing that sold in 5 days.
Oh,
And then after that, I got 3 more listings from the postcards that year. No, I ended up actually 9 total that year, 9 total in 2022 from postcards.
wow. And you were, so let's dial into that first. So 4,000 homes you're hitting per month.
Yep.
That's how you started this. You went balls to the wall right out of the gate. Granted, you had the nest egg, so that makes sense. you're spending $1,000 a month on these postcards.
$1,000 a month minimum. So I was just the initial monthly postcard was just like homes that had sold in the area, and then on the backside of the postcard was a review from a past client in my face, and then obviously the lender on there for the RESPA compliant marketing. And that was it. But then if I had a listing, they also got a just sold. Or they got a just listed and a just sold. So like if there was a just listed, that's three pieces of mail. So you have two, then there's two more. So like last month, just for example, last month I sent out 87,000 postcards because I had 4 listings, and then like I had like 3 buyers, and then and now I'm doing a newsletter every month, and I'm doing that monthly, just that same just listed, just sold, pending in a review.
So you're not even doing anything super creative.
No, it's like super simple.
Wow.
And it literally, the amount of time it takes to do it is literally, I just send the listing over, and that's it. All I do is send the listing. The only one that takes time is
are you still using? We'll get back to this, but you're still using USA Mortgage to do this?
Yeah, USA Mortgage is still doing the postcards for me.
You send them the
send them the listing. I say, hey, this one is just sold, or this one's going to be listed. So like, here's the photos. It's like, all I do is send them photos. They've already got my templates set up, and then they mail them. They FedEx the boxes to my house because it's every door direct mail.
So you have to take them and drop it off at the post office.
Yeah, I take the distribution centers like 5 or 10 minutes from my house, but it also allows me to control what days those are hitting the mailboxes. So the day I drop it off, they hit the mailboxes the next day. Wednesdays and Thursdays in our area, there's nothing in the mailbox. There's no ads or nothing. They're usually like the least amount of bills come on like the weekends and Mondays.
Interesting.
So from that targeting perspective, that's usually when so it's the only thing in the mailbox, right?
How did you figure that out?
I just monitored the mail.
Because you're local, because you're a part of your own target market.
I'm part of my own target. Yeah. Yeah. It was crazy. I did an open house 2 weeks ago, and the postman was like, hey, are you Chris Rigby? And I was like, yeah. He's like, can I get a selfie with you? He's like, you're famous.
I love it.
He's like, everybody is like all the root carriers, and then he knew who my dad was and stuff like that. So it was pretty crazy. I texted my wife. I was like, can't make this up. I was like, this is nuts. But I mean, even when I'm like going into neighborhoods and stuff like that and setting up my open house signs, like there's kids that are be like, are you Christopher Rigby? And I'm like, yeah. I'm like, why? And they're like, you must be a millionaire. Like my dad says you're just like selling so many houses. And I'm like, oh my gosh. It's so, and I mean, that's not what it's.
And you look the part, you've got the suit on, you're recognizable. It's awesome.
But people will honk when I'm setting up my open house signs too. People will honk and wave. I'm like, I have no clue who that was. So, and I read books about before I really started going after this. It was like books about like owning neighborhoods and owning like territories and like really dominating. And on top of like just the postcards and all that stuff, like I know a lot about the area. Like I call every listing agent that's in that area that has a listing. I know what's going on when they list it, when they go under contract. I call them again and talk to them. So that when I am talking to people at my open houses or just in general, I'm like, or a seller, I'm like, hey, I know what this one's in contract. I know what the story was, backstory was on that. So you have like all the information just by like osmosis of being like, I'm super interested in that area. Like I obviously live there and want the prices to go up too, but I also want to have all that information so that when I do go on a listing appointment, I'm like, I know all of this.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant. So, all right. And that's a lot of nuggets there. I want to go back to 2022. At what point, so I guess, how did you determine 4,000 out of the gate? Like, was that just because when you're doing EDDM, you're choosing it by zip code, correct?
You choose it by zip code, and then you choose it by route. So like, you've got
postal route. That's right. It's postal route. It's got nothing to do with the map. That's right. Okay.
Yeah. You look at the map and then you click a postal route and it tells you how many. And like, I've got like a community, like Mukilteo is like a really weird shape. Like there's, it's like larger down at the end and then it gets really skinny and it like wraps up around the coast. And anyway, so like Harbor Point is the main core. Like that's where there's 2 elementary schools, a high school, and a middle school. And then there's more schools in Mukilteo than that, but those are like, that's where the core is. And it's this big, huge horseshoe. And there's a grocery store and all these residential neighborhoods. And they're all like, I mean, there's some older in there, but most of them are like 90 to 2000 built. So a lot of those are like, they bought them when they were new. Their kids are going to be about 18, 20 years old. And they're going to start cycling as their kids are getting out of school. And that's kind of how I determined that area. And it was, so yeah, 4,000 was just there. And that was like what I was comfortable. I was like, wow, it was like $1,000 a month. This is crazy. But I, I have other friends that are agents that are buying leads, and I'm like, they're spending $1,500 a month and they get, 10,000 leads or whatever, or 5,000 leads. I'm like, then they don't call any of them. So I don't know, I guess it doesn't, I was like, I'd rather spend $1,000 and at least people are getting to see my face.
Yeah.
Is kind of how I looked at it. So
you didn't necessarily choose it based on budget as much as just the area you wanted to basically own.
Yeah, is the area I wanted to own. I live there, so I figured, I can own that area. I live there, and then like I'll be able to expand out as my business grows.
Yeah, yeah.
And
So go ahead. Yeah, keep going.
So yeah, I was gonna say, yeah. So that was that. I just did just that area last year. Like that's all I did, and I've stayed consistent even in the winter months.
Started in 2022. You continued in just that area through 23.
Correct.
Okay.
Just that area, and just continued through that. Had more. I did 9 the first year. I think I did 15 last year off of postcards. And then
that's by the way, folks, at an average price point of 1.2 million. So you can do the math on how much volume, because I think that the question that I would have, or anybody would have, is, okay, what's your ROI? And obviously you were spending $1,000 in the beginning. You did 87,000 last year, or last month. Last month. Let's clarify that. How much does that cost?
Last month was like 15,000 in postcards. It was a lot. It was a lot, but I've already got 3 pieces of business off it. So this is like, and this is like, I guess you could call it growth mindset, right? So you look at, okay, I'm like, if I spend $10,000 on postcards and I get 1 listing, it's paid for. Like I paid for all of this year's marketing in like 3 transactions. And so like my profit margin window last year was less than 10% of what I spent on marketing. So I spent like 10%. Like, so I need to increase my spend in my marketing in order to offset taxes. So I need to be spending more as a write-off this year than I did. And I'm like 57% increased over this time last year in my business.
And it's primarily, so far, what I've heard from you, which was the turning point, is postcards. Farming.
Hands down, postcards. And I only do my own open houses. So every listing, like, it's me at the open house. Like, it's my signs. Like those, every time you're doing an open house, it's free advertising. You put your signs out on the boulevard, they're seeing your name, it's free advertising. Then they're getting the postcard, and they're seeing it's your listing. It's powerful when someone's going to pay you $30,000-$40,000 to sell their house. I don't know that they necessarily want a junior agent that doesn't know anything about the market or the area, or is as committed to selling the house because they're not the one getting paid, right?
No shit.
So like if I'm going to hire someone, like if I'm going to go to hire an attorney, I'm like, don't pass me off to your legal assistant. Like I'm paying you. Like, I want you in there defending me or doing something. So that's my aspect on it. And if you don't have listings, like, you should be fighting to try to find them. Like I still do listings at other people's houses it's not my listing. Like I'm not always busy. If I don't have a listing one weekend, like I'm still going to go try to do an open house. I watched, there were a couple different agents that had like a 30% market share, and they did the same thing. Like they always, like I studied their business. Like I studied two different groups. One guy always did open houses every weekend, even if it wasn't his listing. Like, and he was like, I don't know, like 100 transactions a year or something was when he got out of it. He was doing 100 transactions a year. And this other group had a 30% market share in my market. Same thing. Never let anybody else do their open houses. They controlled everything. If you wanted to get in, like, and go through their listings, like you were talking to them. And like, I worked with them for a little bit. It was really amazing. I was like, everybody was coming in. It's like, hey, how's it going? They're like, oh, it's good to see you, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, these people like know you. Like, what in the world? And they're like, oh, yeah, they're regulars. Like, we talk to them. And then they refer business to them.
Yeah.
And like when you're in an open house and someone's like talking to you, because like most people are standoffish. Like you go into a retail store and they're like, you're like, hey, how's it going? You're like, God, get away from me.
Yeah.
And I'm the same way. I'm like, dude, leave me alone.
Yeah.
Um, and that's how open people are in open houses too. Like, I mean, I greet people when they walk in. I'm like, hey, how's it going? I go hang out in the kitchen because you know what? They're gonna walk all the way around that house to avoid you, but they're definitely gonna come look at the kitchen.
Yeah.
And once they've looked at the whole house and you haven't followed them all the way around the house, then you can like start engaging them and asking them questions like, you know, how have you been looking in the area? Have you found any houses that you wanted to write on? If they say no, or they haven't written it, you know, if they've written on houses, it's like, well, how many offers have you written? Like 10. I'm like, wow, that sucks. Like, how's that going? And they're like, oh, we're gonna fire our agent. I mean, you just lead into questions with that with people, but um, you, I pick up clients that open a lot of clients at open houses too. Just, you know, like through my communication with other listings and what's going on, or listings that I didn't get. I'm like, hey, I know this house coming on. And they're
Yeah.
like, oh, how did you know about that? I'm like, oh, I interviewed for the listing. And they're like, because I don't have a listing, I can still talk about it. It's not my official my listing. I can talk
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah.
So, and they're like, oh, well, can you take my information? Like, I didn't ask them for their information.
Yeah.
They asked me to take theirs. So that's try to do like just like through that attraction. So I'm not following up with people. People are contacting me.
Awesome. Awesome. And so, as your systems, you've got to have, what are you using on a back end? So how do you manage your database?
So database we use, well, we were using Present, but or MoxieWorks was what our office provided to us. And it doesn't really matter what CRM that you have, just the one that you use.
Yep.
I mean, you can use Excel or whatever, it is, Google Docs or anything, just whatever you have. So we currently are using Moxie Express. Our brokerage is in the process of switching over to Close, which is like an AI based, like, it's pretty cool. Like it's really cool. It's got like chat GPT built into it. So if you want to like create newsletters and stuff like that. So I mean, I do like the regular stuff. Like if you look at Core or Buffini, it's like you want to have those 4 or 5 coffees a week, or you know, make those contacts with your sphere. I still do all of that stuff, and I still market to my sphere for like, you know, events and things like that that our office puts on. I also did switch brokerages. I stayed within the Windermere brand. I switched last year to the current Windermere office that I'm at. They have a support system of, I mean, it's like 5, 6 basically assistants as of like the office I had that had one where I was kind of pulling my hair out getting stuff done. Here, I'm like, I'm doing more volume and I'm like, I feel like I'm not working as much. So
Nice.
uh, I think where you work is critical too in terms of like what systems and what they're providing for you. I mean, we spend
Yeah.
a lot of money to be real estate agents, so
Yeah.
just to work. I mean, what they're giving you is critical too. But that's definitely been a big component of like this year.
So nothing magical in terms of a CRM. You just use it.
Yep, just use
What
it. I
what's
mean,
your cadence? What's your drip?
so we've got, it's called like, we call it like stay and flow is what it's called, like flow marketing. So like we do you know, like anniversaries, birthdays, holidays, like we do like a pie event. We do like that's right around Thanksgiving time. And then like our office does like Santa pictures. I mean, our office does stuff that like you can call out and like, hey, we're having this event. Like we're just doing a new event that's just, we do like a shredding event where we'll like, you know, everybody can bring their whatever their documents and stuff like that and shred. So there's, and that's the generic stuff. And like, I haven't branched too much out of it from just the generic stuff. And like, I've gotten like 5 deals a year just from starting to do that stuff this year. And that's part of the ninja coaching platform as well. And so this office really embraces that culture. And so that, you know, I think it's like about 5 or 6 contacts out of my sphere every day is what that averages out to.
Wow, that's amazing. I want to go back to the postcards, and you had mentioned, I obviously know these details just through connections, but I don't know like our listeners do. And I think this is important to share because you almost said it nonchalantly, like, yeah, I use a mortgage company, and you know, and that's it. I don't think that just immediately resonates. And so maybe explain it from your perspective, why you chose USA Mortgage to partner with on your marketing, specifically postcards. They're a mortgage company, not a marketing company. Tell me, explain that to anybody who has no idea what we're talking about.
Yeah, so it started off like I'd worked with Martin is a lender that I worked with, and like he started can't remember when he started with USA Mortgage. But anyway, like he's like, "Hey, we got this program." And I did it for a little bit, but it wasn't consistent, and I didn't think we had like a very good message when we were sending out our postcards. So it kind of fell off the radar. We lost touch for about a year, and then like he kind of got back to me. He's like, "I think we should just like start doing this again." And I was like, "I'm looking to invest some money and like start hitting marketing hard." And we started doing it. And he was like, "Okay, so but the breakdown of the cost is 16 cents per postcard mailed. That's the cost. Like that's the cost
With graphic design.
with graphic design. The graphic, if you wanted to change like a whole graphic design, it's like $16 for a redraw. Like that's chump change. Like that's not even like a half a gallon of gas.
Damn near a coffee nowadays.
Right, exactly. Yeah, it's like it's not even Starbucks. Um, so we started doing that, and I was like, okay, $1,000. I'm like hitting 4,000. I'm hitting 4,000 doors. I'm like, that's great. Like I can sustain that.
But
Uh,
hold on. That's graphic design. That's paper, like a postcard paper. It's
yep,
printing. It's postage. Everything. 16
16,
cents.
16 cents. Like you can't even
Wow.
get. I think stamps are 70 cents now.
Wow.
Like
And it's
so,
because it's EDDM, it's incredibly cheaper because of the way the whole system works, because it's basically bulk, because you're bringing it to them, all that stuff, right? I mean, that's what creates the cost.
correct. And well, because it's a lender, they split the cost. So it's really 32 cents. But because it's if you do, it depends on how you do the marketing. So you got to like work with them on the market on like how the design is, so that it's if you say like I want 50%, so that the lender is willing to pay 50%. That I mean, it has to be
That's
compliant.
just a RESPA compliance thing.
Yeah, it's a RESPA compliance thing. Otherwise, you're going to pay 75% if they've only got 25% of the marketplace. I
Right.
was like, the kicker that I found out this year was that a half sheet postcard is this exact same cost as a full sheet.
Oh.
So everybody that gets one of my things, I'm like it's the biggest damn thing in the mailbox.
It's like is that like an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper,
Eight
basically,
and a
or
half
eight
by
by
11
10, or
8.5 by 11 cardstock thick.
wow.
So like just listed, it's not just one picture on the front. It's like a full brochure is going into
Hell
everybody's
yeah.
box. And so for sellers, like you tell sellers, like you're in that area, you get that. You're like, hey, I'm going to send out now because I do 8,700 doors of mailing. Hey, your house, like 8,700 people are going to get this postcard in the mail as soon as we list, like of your house. Like I guarantee nobody else is doing that.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
Not to that many doors. So
No, that's amazing, dude. That is absolutely amazing. And as you mentioned, it's really just a simplistic strategy of just listed, just sold, probably open houses. Is there anything, do you not insert any other form of marketing with the postcards yet?
no, not yet.
Really?
No, there's nothing else other than that. And so I think the goal is to start incorporating. I mean, like I talked about it yesterday. I was like,
Social.
I want to redraft these in social, and that's part of the reason why I reached out to you. I was like, I got to get that courage to get on camera. So, but you don't get that courage until after you've done it.
You're
So
already a celebrity. This should be easy for you.
I don't want the attention though. Like it's different, and you don't like the way
Sure.
you look on camera when you look on camera. I think that's my biggest thing. So it's a matter of just doing it. So like I know I think if as long as I'm coming from a place where I'm providing value, then I'm okay with it. And so I do have to just get comfortable with it. It's just a process. It's like I know the first video is gonna suck.
Yeah.
Maybe the
Of course. Yeah.
100th video is gonna suck too, but eventually they'll start getting better.
Correct. Everything we do in life, when we don't start out as experts, we're not great at anything. And everything that, anything you want to be good at, you gotta practice. You gotta do more of it, right?
Right.
So you kind of alluded to the evolution of your business, which now is evolving. And part of that was our connection, which is us helping you with social. So uh, we mentioned the social media side of things. What do you envision? So I'm just going to ask a simple question. What's next?
So in order to like continue that, like, because everything's evolving. So like the boomers right now are the ones that like that print material is like resonating with, because it's death, divorce, job relocation, and then we don't say downsizing anymore. We say lifestyle change, which is like going from a 4,000 square foot house to like a 1,500 square foot house, just because of like you don't want to take care of that much. So like those are really the four things that are moving people right now in the marketplace, and like the two of those are like death and that lifestyle change. And so like postcards resonate with those people. Like they are the ones that are like, they're empty nesters. Like they go check that mailbox every day
Yeah.
because like
Something to do.
that's something to do. Like I can't tell you. I mean, like seriously. So
Yeah.
so those are like two of those four pillars. And so like to get to that third three of those four is, millennials. And that's where, they're on social media. Like I was talking to someone the other day and they said we were in Hawaii and he's like, I'm 45. He's like, I was like, oh, let's figure out what restaurants are around here. So he's like, I'm hopping on Google. And he's like, my wife is like 5 years younger than me. She jumps on TikTok and starts using TikTok search engine. And he's like, we found a way better restaurant than what Google said. And he's like, the authenticity of
Yeah.
social media
Yeah.
is that you're watching a video versus some random review that you don't even know if it was a
Yeah.
real or a fake review.
It's also pay to play on Google. So you don't know, Google doesn't give a shit. They're going to promote who gives them money. Whereas TikTok, you're going to find authentic, real people reviewing restaurants.
Right. And they said, we found this restaurant. It was like the most amazing restaurant we've had at. And like, we go back there every time we go back to Hawaii now.
That's fascinating, dude.
So that's the presence that I want to have in my local market. And I do, like next year, like I'm going to be branching out into a different area that's attached to Mukilteo as well.
So that means more postcards. So a bigger budget.
Bigger budget, more postcards.
It means a larger social presence.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else?
I got to get to there will be a point where, I can't do every open house. Or what does that conversation look like? Like, hey, I'm not going to do Friday, Saturday, Sunday open houses. I'll do like one open house a weekend, and like I'll be there for like 4 or 5 hours. And then like, another listing, I'll do 4 or 5 hours at that open house, and then I'll do alternate other weekends and stuff like that. I think I can get to I could finish through this year without having to bring on like a team member. Like my team right now is like all the marketing people, like yourself included. You're part of the team because you're assisting me in my social media, and your team, that's part of the team. So anybody that's behind you, it's not necessarily I'm the face, right?
Yeah.
I'm out there kissing babies and shaking names and signing autographs or whatever. But that's the way I want it to be. I want to be so that people were I wasn't handed off. Like that doesn't feel good when you get handed off.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to be handed off.
Yeah.
So at least working with the person that's like got the expertise and the knowledge, and then they're in the background, they're having other people assist them.
How do you anticipate making that transition? Because as you mentioned, you think some of your success is specific to the fact that you're the one who shows up. So when you have to evolve and you have to scale, how do you anticipate effectively executing that?
That's a really good question, because you watch like the natural like progression of teams, like they turn and burn. Like the junior agents that come under, once they learn how to figure out to do it on their own,
Yeah.
they go off and leave.
Yeah.
And they try to go do it on their own. And then a lot of times they figure out, wow, that's a little harder than I thought it was.
Yeah.
But you have to find a unicorn that doesn't want to run the ship, that just wants to be present and work with someone.
Almost like someone who's got customer service or admin as the fiber of their being, but they want to make more money than just being an admin.
Right. Exactly. They don't want to handle they
They don't want to market. They don't want to be the face of the franchise. They're really good at communication and paperwork and that sort of thing.
right. Exactly. And then they just have to be, that's the tough thing though, is like, if you're the business owner, like,
Yeah.
is there really a time when the phone's off?
Yeah.
Is there?
I mean, no, but for most real estate agents, yes. And that's why people like you are succeeding at such a high level. And as we wind this podcast down, I mean, that's first of all, I didn't, I've gotten to know you, but we don't have these deep conversations. And this was fascinating because there's a lot of nuggets in this that are just magic. It's gold. But at the same token, it's not anything that anyone couldn't emulate. And some of it is just simple hard work, and I don't honestly, the sad thing is, Chris, sad, but also validating for you, is that most agents listening to this are going to poo-poo that and not even consider showing up to the office early. They're not even going to consider, they're going to make an excuse as to why they shouldn't, or they're going to make an excuse as to why I can't afford 4,000 postcards. And that's what creates a success for those that are willing to put in the work, because there's some risk that goes along with this. Wearing a suit every day. Many people are going to poo-poo that. It's just all the things that are so relatively simplistic, but also massively effective, and you're living proof of it. And that's why I really wanted to tell this story, because I think that what you're doing is incredible. And it's, going down to the intimate details of understanding what's the best day to drop stuff in the mail based upon the fact that you're living there receiving the mail. So, you didn't do any like sleuth work. You didn't get into the post mail. You didn't get to the post office and ask questions. You just looked in your mailbox. But it's brilliant. And I don't know, I've never heard an agent tell me that they did just that. I love what you're doing, dude. I'm excited to see where you continue to go, and I'm excited to be a part of it. If somebody wants to get in touch with you, if they want to touch base with you, connect with you, follow you, what are the best ways to do that?
Social media is just Christopher W. Rigby on Instagram. You can direct message me there, or like phone number, just 425-220-0621. Text or call. I'm always available. Like I believe in giving back. Like I want, even other agents that are in my community, like in Mukilteo, they're like, well, what are you doing? I'm like, I gave them the same person that I talked about postcards. I'm like, hey, you're going to do postcards with them? They're like, no, they didn't want to do it. So to answer your question, it's the same thing, exact thing. I gave that playbook to someone else in my market area. I'm like, because everybody that wants to work with me doesn't necessarily going to want to work with you.
Yeah.
Everybody that wants to work with you isn't going to want to work with me.
Yeah.
I mean, so there's no, the more we share information too on these listings and all that kind of stuff, it helps us with appraisals. It helps us with supporting values. So I'm more than willing to like help other people if anybody wants to reach out. So
that's amazing. That's refreshing. And I think the last thing I will say too is first of all, if you're in a position where you're struggling and you want to grow, it's always great to have mentors that you can reach out to and ask questions to. Also, if somebody wants a connection to USA Mortgage, obviously you can give it to them. I can give it to you too. I have a national presence. I am a social coach for USA Mortgage, so I know everyone. I know all the players there, and they're national. So if you're in another market, you're in Florida or DC or Minnesota or Arizona, and you want a connection, reach out to either one of us, and we'll get you connected to someone that you could participate with in the marketing. I don't know of any other mortgage company that does anything like that. It is pretty fascinating, and it also is validating that strategy, which is on the traditional side, still very much works, and it's far from dead. And I'm not sure that even with upcoming generations, even though they're very digital, they're still going to have mailboxes for the foreseeable future. And as long as humans have been alive and had mailboxes, we like to pick things out of our mailbox, right? Unless they're bills. It's just a human. It's like a dopamine hit, right? Like somebody commenting on your socials.
Yeah, I think all those like, crappy little nickel ads or whatever that come in the mail, I'm like, those companies wouldn't be doing that if it
Yeah.
wasn't successful on some level, right?
Yeah.
Like they've been doing it for hundreds of years, probably.
Yeah, you're right. You're
I
right
mean,
in a lot of cases. And you are one of, I mean, you see a lot of agents doing it, but I think you're also, I guess last question I'll leave this with is it's not, you did have quick success from your postcards, but I would imagine if somebody asked you, what kind of a time commitment do I need to mentally be prepared for if I'm going to go down this path? What would you tell them?
if you're gonna do just postcards, and like I think the biggest thing is that like you're doing postcards in a confined area, like, and make sure that like that area is like the area you're operating in. Like, are you doing open houses in that area? Are you doing open houses all over the damn place? If you're doing open houses all over the damn place, people aren't going to be able to just like your postcards aren't going to be as effective. So if you're doing postcards where you're doing open houses where they're seeing your signs, they see you're working constantly every weekend. If you do just the postcards, I'd say just a minimum of 12 months. You can accelerate your success by like doing open houses within that. And then, if you get a listing in there, I mean, you better make sure you like send out just listed, just pending, whatever. Just, I mean, like they get those extra faces. Like those are, I mean, it's not free, but you're talking about something that's, what is it, 7 times with like someone sees your face before they like,
Yeah.
when they go to think about who the agent is, they think of you. I mean, you want to just at least get a seat at the table to interview. Nobody's going to hire you if they don't know who you are. If they've never heard of you, they don't know. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I do go into Google to like look up stuff and find people, but like I'm not the person that's consistent with their mailings. Like that's the one that's going to get the business.
They don't have to go to Google. And even then, as what you're doing now is, and what we are going to help you do is take it to another level, because now it's that mind share that you already are starting to own. And when you take it over to social, it's that same boomer is also on social, but maybe less than the millennial and then the up and coming Gen Z. And then it's just all those same people, although they spend more time on social, they're still going to get the postcard. And then it just brings everything together. All of this stuff works incredibly well together. Nothing is magical on its own, standing alone. When you start to put these things together, it just becomes massive domination. And Chris, I was just thinking to myself, like, we need to do a follow-up to this, either maybe after the first of the year or something like that, just to kind of see how the evolution is going and where you're at and what's working and what's not working. Cause I think a lot of people can learn from this and also realize that this is, you just got to be committed. You got to be committed and you got to figure out how to find a budget. You have means, as you mentioned, 16 cents a pop. That's insanely cheap. You just found a great resource. You learned that you could put more stuff on a bigger piece that's going to stand out more, and it didn't cost you any more. And just things like that. Like you're just alert. And dude, I applaud you, man. It's fun. I'm glad to know you. I'm glad to watch your success. It's fun to be a part of. Thank you for sharing with our audience. And I look forward to doing this again soon.
Absolutely.
Lab Coat Agents Podcast.